Still haven't heard anything from my council member or anybody from government stepping in to help us. Nothing. I mean, it's quiet on it. My next door neighbor has to shut down the music at 10 o'clock at night so I can get to sleep. But I'm a mile away from the Cedar Hills Grill, and I hear this beep, 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 beep.
We're not operating at 10 o'clock at night, sir.
Well, somebody.
I think we have a question.
Real quick, just so you know, I just want to be very clear. I made the point, I'm going to do everything I can to oppose the expansion of landfill, all right, and find alternative methods to move the garbage out of our community.
Like what?
We
What
appreciate
is your
that, but
vision?
we're talking now. I mean, you're talking 2028, but we're talking now. We want some answers now.
Well, we're going to try to get you answers right now. Politically, I have to get to a point where I can get 5 votes. So
And
what
then
that
what is your
means.
vision when you get 5 votes?
What's that?
You mentioned you have a vision when you get 5 votes. What is this vision?
Well, the vision is to not expand the landfill beyond the 2028 timeframe.
That's a vision?
That's, well, it's a start. You know, in this business, you've got to start, you've got to get a plan put together. Otherwise, well, let me tell you what it looks like if I don't succeed. Okay? Then you've got a landfill that's going to be going operational until at least 2040.
If your vision is to do, not to do something, what about to do
Well,
something?
we've obviously got to explore what the options are, what the current cost recommendations are relating to things like shipping this stuff by rail or waste energy facility. We've got people to talk about that as well. So first step is to put
That's
the plan
not
together.
part of your vision.
Very important to hear from you tonight, and then I go to work at the county council to try and find a coalition that will not grow the landfill any farther. That would be an enormous success. In the business that I operate in, you got to celebrate the small victories. We got to start somewhere. Hold on. We'll get to you in a minute. I got 3 other people, and then I'll come back to you, okay? You, sir.
Thank you. No voice tonight, excuse that. You're looking for some answers, and I'd like to recommend or suggest some questions. First of all, I'd like to ask one. How many of you have a concern about the odor? So here's the question that you should pose to these gentlemen. What is the odor? What's in it? What is the chemistry of the odor? They don't know. They have detectors. They monitor 1 or 2 or a very short list of volatile compounds, but they've never done the analytical chemistry to really know what's in it. I can say that. I'm a scientist. I just finished doing the analytical chemistry on a massive number of King County sewage sludge samples from the Snoqualmie forests, and including some of the sludge that goes in this landfill. It then gets trucked over the mountains, the sewage sludge from Renton Plant and West Point and Brightwater, and it's put on all of our food crops, all of the wine, grapes, all of the apples and pears, and all the wheat, all the veggies you eat are totally buried in King County sewage sludge. And it's very toxic material. I've been doing the analytical chemistry. Most recently, I've been doing the analytical chemistry on the volatiles. It's called the sludge volatilome. It's a new area of science. While King County and the state and the health agency and the Clean Air Agency may list a short number of compounds they monitor, I have a publication coming out in a couple of weeks, and I can give you a little preview. So far, I'm up to 2,000 volatile chemicals alone from King County sewage sludge, which includes the chemicals that come out of the Cedar Hills landfill leachate pipe that runs to the south plant. Of those 2,000 chemicals, already about 288 are what are called undetected. They've never been detected before. We haven't even completed the chemical structures. Of all of that, about 12% so far are greenhouse gases. And so while King County and Jay Inslee and Dow Constantine tell you by email every day about their greenhouse gas control programs, they're looking at methane. There are hundreds of greenhouse gases. So when someone asks about these odors, They don't know what is the chemistry of the odors. They're very toxic chemicals. My day job is, I work in cancer research. I'm developing some new vaccines for cancer. What I'm really interested in is how do you prevent cancer? Cancer is caused, in most cases, by environmental exposure to toxic chemicals and gases. You are all victims of what you consider an odor. It's an odor because you detect it in your nose. The hundreds, I'm up to 2,000 so far, gaseous chemicals, of which many are greenhouse toxic gases, just from the sludge. When EPA, I want the landfill leachate waters out of these lagoons so that I can include them in my analysis so that you can ask better questions. That's the point.
How much of that is leaching into the Cedar River?
It's leaching nonstop. There is no such thing as a landfill that doesn't leak or leach in all directions. I'm also looking at the East Wenatchee landfill, leachates and stream runs that go right into the Columbia River. State of Washington does a very bad job of
Sir, if I
monitoring.
could just give maybe another minute or so, and anything.
I'm gonna end in 1 second.
Okay, okay.
So the point is, I just wanted to come here tonight to help you formulate some questions. I know you want answers, but simply ask what's in it. Whether it's the landfill leachate, the sewage sludges, the odors you smell, what is leaching into your soil? What's under your house? What's under your lawn? What's under your veggie garden? Ask for and demand analytical chemistry of all that's in there, and at that point, you will be frightened. That's the question.
Excellent. Thank you for your point. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Matt. I live in Issaquah. And one thing that's clear are the three different options, but one thing that's not so clear to me would be the decision criteria by which the option was selected. So maybe somebody could help me understand what were the priorities and why the decision, what ultimately drove the decision to expand the landfill.
Yeah, I'll start. Can you hear me in the back?
Okay, thank you. So the criteria was financial, it was environmental, and it was risk-based as well. Feasibility-based relative to the time that we're afforded to put a solution in place. As I mentioned, we have less than 10 years from when our capacity will be consumed. So I'm obligated to you and to 37 cities to have a disposal solution in place in less than 10 years. So that was one factor, right, is what can I realistically and assuredly have in place in less than 10 years. We also looked at the environmental implications associated with all three choices. All three of these choices are legal, right? They're permittable, but they do have varying degrees of environmental impacts. Now, when it comes to landfilling, we know a lot about landfilling because we've done it for a long time, right? The county's done it for over 50 years. And the environment in which they've done it has become much more complicated because of the regulations and how they've evolved. And I think that's a good thing because it's helped to preserve the environment. It used to be we would dig a big hole and throw garbage in it. And seepage from that is problematic. But in a modern cell, which is how this is designed now, it's like putting it into a sealed container, right? It's sealed on the bottom, it's sealed on the top. The methane is captured, the leachate is captured and processed, and so it's very different, right? But we know a lot about landfilling. We can learn from Seattle's experience and from Snohomish County's about rail export, and did. We didn't know a lot about waste to energy.
You still don't.
So how could we make this decision when you've got relative expertise in 2 out of the 3 areas? Well, we hired the experts for waste to energy. And we think we hired the best in the nation.
And we thought that too.
We spent $250,000, and we went with wide open eyes. The task was, if King County were to implement a waste energy solution, what is the best fit technology? What would it cost? And what are the environmental implications? And we let the third-party experts answer that question. So when you saw the presentation on the screen earlier, or if you read it in the comprehensive plan, when you see the environmental implications of greenhouse gases or the capital costs associated with the waste energy plant. In fact, Philip Schmidt-Pathman is here in the room, and he was on the team, right? Those numbers came from third-party waste-to-energy experts who have been managing projects recently and helped to inform that comparative analysis. And part of it was environmental, part of it was financial, part of it was risk-based and feasibility-based for what we could actually implement in the next 10 years.
You mentioned greenhouse gases and this proposed legislation on carbon tax. How does that affect the financials for expanding the landfill?
Could you repeat the question one more time?
So you mentioned greenhouse gases and the costs. How does proposed legislation around carbon tax affect the financials for your primary recipient?
We did not factor in legislation that's not currently in play. And the greenhouse gas analysis was a separate analysis. It was an environmental concern, not a financial concern per se.
So when you said it was all items legal, aren't you violating the 2000 lawsuit settlement by going above 788 feet for areas 5, 6, and 7? King County voted for it and approved a good faith effort to stay at 788 feet. Asking for 830 feet is not a good faith effort. So that is not legal. So how can you say it's not legal to extend that?
So we will abide by and honor our settlement agreement.
Okay, hold on, we have a question here, waiting very patiently. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. My name is Dick Campbell. I'm a lifelong resident of within 2 miles of both Cedar Hills, Cedar Grove up on Tiger Mountain. I'm also a retired high school principal of Liberty High School. My first question is of the public health gentleman that spoke a couple of minutes ago. In the late 90s through the early 2000s, the Issaquah School District was directly involved with Cedar Grove and the landfill in terms of air quality and the effects that it had on the health of staff and students. I'm wondering if that is still being monitored and what, as a result of the early management through, and again, is your department involved with those readings and those attendance records and so forth? Is public health, your department, involved with anything as it affects the students that go to this school? My wife was a kindergarten teacher here for close to 20 years, and it's documented that the attendance of faculty at this school was lower, and it was more impacted by the air quality and so forth than across the other elementary schools in the Issaquah School District. Is the public health, your department, still monitoring any of that?
But not that I'm aware of.
So that's all?
We don't have any active studies on health impacts.
Did you work with the school district and the community to get Cedar Grove to put in their directional blowers through their curtains to make sure that they weren't exhausting fumes and mold and spark into the wind patterns that naturally blow across Maple Hills and the South Renton Highlands.
Yeah, I'm really sorry that our colleagues from Puget Sound Clean Air aren't here right now because you're asking a jurisdictional question that's outside of our particular purview. We do coordinate with the Clean Air Agency when the department receives our complaints. We make sure that those get logged and work with the Clean Air Agency. But you're asking a question of me that's outside of our jurisdictional authority.
So I guess I was confused. I thought you were part of the King County Public Health. And I'm not being facetious here.
I'm not trying to be evasive in the question. I'm just trying to clarify where the agency's jurisdictional authority is relative to the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency.
So I guess my question would be, right now, and I've been retired for a number of years, is the air quality in this general area, because I just live a little bit farther, is it as good as it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Who's measuring it? Who's
Puget Sound Clean Air Agency?
your department?
No, that's not my department. Puget Sound Clean Air Agency is a regional agency that includes King County, but several other counties in the area. They have federal delegated authority around clean air issues. Public health jurisdiction is directly over the operations of the solid waste facility. We do work with the Clean Air Agency when odor complaints come in, but we don't have regulatory oversight when.
So if the health of staff and people that work in this building is being impacted, that's not a concern, or the students that are going here. I mean, as a building principal, if I have a student that has a virus that's going to spread and impact hundreds of kids, public health becomes real involved in that. Somebody in the public health department was involved 15 years ago when we were actively working against what was going on at Cedar Hill. So, anyway, that's one question. The other question is water quality. Who and when is it being measured, and where is it being published? It used to be published in the Issaquah Press. Issaquah Creek, Cedar River, Lake Sammamish, Lake Washington. It used to be measured, and King County still has a water measure. I fish around it every week down in the middle of Lake Sammamish. Where are those records being published?
Yeah, I mean, we do on-site monitoring, but I think the question you're asking is the off-site waters and conditions are likely handled by our Water and Lands division. And, you know, we'll capture that in terms of providing some information as to where you can get the records that are created and published on that. I don't have that.
It should be affecting what you're doing. You guys do up to those numbers every 30 days.
Oh, we do regular monitoring on site. I was referring to the off-site waters that you spoke of. Those off-site waters are going to be monitored by our Water and Land Division, and we can provide separate information as to where those records are kept.
Let me make a point here. I see this across the board on a lot of different issues. You come talk to me about why isn't this Hobart Road and we're interchange with Highway 18, and why isn't the county does this road and then the state does this road, and you hear all these interjurisdictional challenges and no one really has the answer. And for you, as taxpayers, you don't really care which government's involved. You want answers and you want solutions, right? That's what you want. And you hear, unfortunately, we've got this balkanization of all these various local governments. And Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, as maybe some of you remember, about a year ago we had I think maybe it was even in this building, a town hall, and there was a real problem with response times for Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. Was anyone there for that? Okay, so I, Nick, Chang, and they came up to my office, and we're committed in my office at the meeting to being much more responsive to the public, and then here we are. So it's a problem. Look, as we flesh out this comprehensive plan, trying to make sure that this interagency relationship and simple things like data reporting be included and widely publicized is an important part of that. We need to know whether we are healthy or less healthy today than we were 10 years ago. It's obviously it's a quality of life issue, so I'm thinking about that as you're talking. You've been very patient back here. Good to see you again.
My name is Jackie Green, and I want to say thank you to Representative Dunn for having this town hall. I think a lot of us are really interested in what's going on in the landfill. And what I always like to point out is you see this many people in the room, but for every person you see, there's probably another 50 people that they're representing, if not more. And that was one of the things that was proven in the lawsuit in the early thousands, is that they thought it was just a few people who were complaining. It turned out to be 4,900 households. You know, I guess, where do I start? When I think about the past, present, and future implications of the landfill, it's really upsetting to me. I was raised in this community. I'm raising my children in this community. My family's been here for 5 generations. I'm raising the 6th generation. And when I look at the future that you're proposing for my children, when I go through the reports and I look at reports that are done by consultants that the Solid Waste Division hired, estimating that the aquifer that the landfill is over will be contaminated by 2058, that upsets me. When I look at different reports that were uncovered during various lawsuits, that surrounding communities have been exposed to 33 times the EPA acceptable limit to vinyl chloride and known carcinogen, that makes me upset. And when I also look at the vibrations that have currently been happening with your roads that you've been doing, damaging structures, that makes me upset. And what really makes me upset is when you say that you want to be a good neighbor, because you've been nothing but bad. So please don't say that anymore. And you know, just to kind of put another human spin on it is, and I guess to go back to contacting you guys, a couple years ago, there was a horrible gas smell that filled our home, horrible. And I called the fire department, I called the landfill, and they said, nothing's wrong, we don't know what you're talking about, nothing's wrong. And then a month later, and I followed up too, and then a month later, we got a little postcard in the mail saying, oh, there was a minor gas leak. Well, it turns out it was actually a ruptured gas line that had filled our house, and the landfill lied to us even when we contacted them. And then recently, there's been major road construction that had started in late April, the beginning of late April, where it started shaking our houses, we started getting cracks in our walls, I got massive headaches, had to take time off work because I was getting migraines. Again, was calling your staff almost every single day, and oh, well, we don't know if it's us, and this and that, and it's like, well, it literally started the day that you started construction, and I can tell you when they're turning the stuff on and off. So it's stuff like that where it's been proven over the years that you guys don't care about our community, and you're just going to operate in whatever way you choose to operate. And while I understand closing the landfill isn't something that can be done tomorrow, multiple things have to be done. I am absolutely not for the expansion. I don't want to see garbage from my park. I don't want to see it from other communities. I don't want our groundwater to get contaminated even quicker than it is now, which, by the way, they have interim covers on, I believe, 3 of the areas, which doesn't provide adequate protection for the communities. So just so you all know that. And it also is more likely to contaminate the groundwater quicker. There is some major concerns with this, and the expansion is not the way to go. And when we look at the feasibility studies that were done, a lot of them, the methodology was dictated by the county and doesn't follow modeling that other countries do, like in the EU, where they do waste energy and they use totally different modeling, and it is actually the preferred practice in the European Union as well as Scandinavia, and even China does it, which I think we should be better than this. And you know, railing, well, personally, I don't believe that's the best option because we've had so many problems, I don't think we should send it somewhere else. To me, that's still a better option than landfilling in Western Washington, where rain is the biggest enemy to landfilling. So that is my rant. I don't really have a question.
My name is Brad Jones, and I've been involved in landfill for over 20 years. My firm and I were the ones that filed the class action lawsuit against the county in 1997. And that lawsuit was settled in 2000, and I'll get a little bit to that settlement in a moment. But I want to tell you some of the things that I learned about the landfill, both in that lawsuit and then in another recent lawsuit I had with the county. If you live within 2 miles of the landfill and you've owned your property since at least 1999, you were probably a member of the class. There was about 8,000 people that were participants, and if you filled out a claim form, you probably participated in some of the recovery. But that was not the first landfill lawsuit. The Cedar Hills has been sued a number of times back in the 80s and into the 90s. In fact, even one point a court came in and imposed conditions on the continued operation of the landfill. But some of the evidence we uncovered during that class action lawsuit was quite disturbing. It showed that the county was negligent in its design, in its construction, and in its operation of the landfill. The county had even manipulated its own environmental impact statement to cover up some of the problems it knew it was having with the landfill at the time. The result was that the neighborhoods surrounding the landfill had construction noise, and for people living in the very western end, they had vibrations from what was called flare stack rumble. And this landfill, to give you an idea of the size, this landfill produces 10,000 cubic feet of landfill gas every minute. So think about the volume. If you took a cube, I'm probably about 30 feet from the wall, 30 feet wide, 30 feet long, and 10 feet high, it would fill that cube with complete landfill gas in 1 minute. Probably fill this entire room in under 10 minutes. It's a huge volume of landfill gas. And when you think about a landfill, you have to think about a landfill as kind of a living creature. It's almost alive. It's a biological reactor. There's all sorts of things going on in the landfill that affect the production of the landfill gas and where it goes and how it travels. Now, over 2 years of litigation, at the end, the county agreed to pay $16.5 million to settle the lawsuit. It was more important than the money were some other conditions that the class members wanted to make sure were imposed upon the county. And I'll get to that in a minute, because you've already heard reference to one of those conditions, which was that the landfill be no higher than 788 feet. The comprehensive plan is proposing that they elevate the landfill to 830 feet, or over 40 feet higher than the settlement agreement provides for.
So you're going to talk about the option.
Now, 4 years ago, I was approached by another family that lived on the east side of the landfill, near where you see that orange area where it comes out with a little kind of triangle. By the way, that orange triangle, if you see that white line, there was one condition imposed upon the county by the county health department in 1960 when they got the original permit to operate this landfill. That one condition was you never dump any garbage within a 1,000-foot buffer surrounding the landfill. Within years after they started opening the landfill, they started dumping garbage in the buffer. They dump garbage into the buffer, and that's why you see that orange extending in 2 areas outside of the buffer. That's where they dump garbage, within 300 feet into the buffer. And now, because those are old areas, you've got contaminated groundwater that has migrated out of that cell and down the hill toward the landfill boundary. Now, to understand some of the problems the landfill is facing, I think it's important to understand some basic facts. First, as I mentioned, you want to think of it as a living being. Second, as somebody else mentioned, water is the enemy of landfills. Water creates a host of problems for landfills. Water increases the rate of production of landfill gas, so landfill more landfill gas is produced in a wet environment. It also poses problems for landfill gas collection pipes. So when I started in this business 25 years ago, there were, I think, 15 landfills operated in Western Washington. I think we're down to 3. And every county-owned landfill that existed in Western Washington is now closed, with one exception, this landfill. Everybody else has decided that it's much more environmentally sound to do something else with their waste. Western Washington is not a good environment for landfills. Arid climates are best. So there's landfills in eastern Oregon and eastern Washington that are not near any residential neighborhoods. They're out in the middle of nowhere and that are in environmental conditions that are much better for landfill. Now third, because of the huge volume of garbage dumped into the landfill, as I mentioned, you get about 10,000 cubic feet of landfill gas. Now, a couple of things. The people from the county who talked about Puget Sound clean air and this jurisdictional problem, they're absolutely right. They have no authority under state law to regulate odors. That authority is specifically given to the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. And let me tell you real quickly how they operate. They respond. They seldom do inspections. You have to call them and report an odor. And the only way that they will cite the landfill for a violation is one of their inspectors has to come out to where you made the odor complaint, and they have to detect the odor on a 0 to 5 scale. It has to be at least a 2. It has to be an offensive odor. So they have to be able to confirm whatever the odor complaint is. So the only way that the county is going to get cited for odor violations is if you call Puget Sound Clean Air Agency and one of the inspectors comes out. So Councilmember Dunn, I think, is to be complimented for the fact that he's trying to get Puget Sound Clean Air to be more responsive. I mean, it took me almost an hour and a half to get here from downtown, and that's where their offices are. So if there's an inspector sitting downtown, and odors are transitory. Odors can be there for a minute, 5 minutes, an hour. So by the time you call and somebody drives out here, oftentimes they're going to smell, and they're not going to, the wind's going to change, or the conditions of the landfill that cause the odor are going to change, so they're not going to experience that. Also, you may hear talk.
That's not really true, actually, out here. The odor really, I think you should have this, the odor really does stick around for hours and days.
Yes, and unfortunately, I was just out here with some friends a couple weeks ago, and I smelled the worst landfill odor, and all the times I've been out here, worst landfill odor I've ever smelled 2 weeks ago. It was at night at about 9 o'clock. And according to people I've been talking to recently, that's when they're getting the odor most frequently, is in the nighttime. And that'll particularly happen as you move into the winter months. The weather conditions that are most conducive are going to be still conditions and calm conditions. I see you want to come, yeah, okay. So, yeah, let me just give you a couple of things, because there was this other lawsuit that I had. On December 7th, 2013, a pipe ruptured at the landfill. It was carrying landfill gas from the North Flare station to the energy plant. When they had constructed that, for 40 years, the landfill had designed all the landfill gas piping to take the landfill gas to the North Flare station at the north end of the landfill. The energy plant's at the south end, a mile away. So they had to build a pipeline from the North Flare station to the energy plant to deliver all the gas to the energy plant. Well, that was going to be expensive. It's expensive to buy pipe. So the county decided, well, to save money, they were going to dig up some old pipe, 20-year-old pipe buried in the landfill. They hauled it out, they dusted it off, and they laid it on the ground, on top of the ground, as part of their piping system. Their consultant told them, don't do that. It'll fail. It'll break. The county did it anyway. And within a couple of years, the pipe did exactly what the consultant told them to do. It broke. It took the county 6 hours to find the leak, the break in the pipe. And during that time, over 1 million cubic feet of landfill gas was released into the atmosphere. Now, we went to trial last year against the county. And a 12-person jury of King County residents found that the county was negligent in its operation of the landfill and found that the county had caused a nuisance. They awarded individually $50,000 to plaintiffs in that case, and the jury also found that the property values had been reduced by 10%. And so the county had to pay that too. Now, finally, and the most important thing, and the reason some of my clients have asked me to come here is to talk briefly about the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement What we discovered in the earlier lawsuit is the longer a cell remains open and the higher it goes, the worse the odors get. So as a critical component of the settlement agreement, we put in a provision that states King County agrees to make a good faith effort to keep the maximum height of areas 5, 6, and 7 of the landfill at or below 788 feet above sea level. That's in the settlement agreement that the King County Council passed. This comprehensive plan calls for raising that to 830 feet on areas 5, 6, and 7, and they're going to get more revenue. And one of the reasons they get more revenue is because this landfill, you folks, subsidize county government. This property used to be owned by the state. It was given to the county for free in the 60s. In 2004, somebody in the county came up with the bright idea of, why doesn't King County government charge rent to King County Solid Waste Division for the landfill? And they started charging $5 million a year in rent that goes into the county general fund and subsidizes other county operations. Since that time, the county general fund has collected over $50 million in revenue from rent for the free property that the county got from Washington State. So there are reasons that the county wants to keep this open. But I find irony in the sign up here that we are a King County green school. When we had that class action lawsuit, children were being prevented from going outside and having play days, and some of the kids were seen throwing up out in the school. And teachers and other people here were not coming to school because of their exposure to this. So I just wanted to share some of that perspective and some of the background on
Okay, so we have 30 minutes left before we have to give the space back. But I want to hear just some more comments. And then also remind you that when this comes up before the King County Council and also the Regional Policy Committee, we are going to have public testimony in front of the 9-member King County Council. And I really can't underscore how important it is for folks to show up at that. It really makes a huge difference. Some of you have been showing up lately, and I really appreciate it. So if you share the vision that you want to see this thing shut down, please take the time to show up and make your voice heard, because they're just not really focusing on it in most other places across King County. And with a large turnout, I think it'll make a difference. Sir, you were next.
Hi, my name is Carl Wagner. I've lived in this neighborhood for 25 years. This is the second Cedar landfill meeting that I've attended. It was like early, late 90s or I think for the first plan. This is a question for Pat. Could you summarize, you said it has 10 years of life expectancy under current regulations. I assume that's the current height limit and the current areas that you're actively using. In the slide you had up there, you showed the upper right corner as an area of expansion where I think you have some buildings. I guess that goes past the dotted line. The big issue last time is if you take this out for the extended plan, besides the height, is there any encroachment on any of the buffer zone? That was a big deal last time.
Okay. So let me restate, let me make sure I get your question right.